Hit the streets to ask people what they think. Challenging U.S. leadership on trade can have consequences, but working with the U.S. may open the door to better deals. That's the message President Donald Trump is sending to world leaders, starting with some of China's key trading partners. On Tuesday, Trump said he will announce an additional 10% tariff on all BRICS members pretty soon. The BRICS group's major members include China, Russia, Brazil, India, and South Africa. Here's President Trump speaking to reporters during a cabinet meeting.
BRICS was set up to hurt us. BRICS was set up to degenerate our dollar and take our dollar as the standard, take it off as the standard. And that's okay if they want to play that game, but I can play that game too. So anybody that's in BRICS is getting a 10% charge.
Is that immediate, sir? Or is that
pretty soon.
If they engage in some behavior?
Well, if they're a member of BRICS, they're going to have to pay 10% tariff just for that one thing. And they won't be a member long. And if we lost the world standard dollar, that would be like losing a war, a major world war. We would not be the same country any longer. We're not going to let that happen.
If imposed, U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods will rise from 55% to 65%. Led by China and Russia, BRICS has grown to a bloc of 11 countries, representing about 40% of global GDP. The group aims to challenge the U.S.-led global financial system, including promoting China's yuan as an alternative to the U.S. dollar in global trade. Here's what White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt told NTD White House correspondent Iris Tao on Monday.
What policies should countries stay away from to avoid being subject to additional tariffs?
Sure. Well, the president feels, generally speaking, that BRICS is seeking to undermine the interests of the United States. It's the president's utmost responsibility to put the interests of the United States first. He'll take any action necessary to prevent countries from taking advantage of the United States and our people.
Moving to broader trade negotiations, on Monday evening, Trump signed an executive order postponing reciprocal tariffs until August 1st, except for China, which faces no delay. He made it clear on Truth Social, no more extensions after that deadline. That's when new tariffs will finally take effect. Since Monday, 14 countries have received official letters from the White House notifying them of their proposed tariff rates. President Trump warned those nations not to retaliate or try to reroute goods through lower tariff countries to avoid the new levies. He also encouraged foreign companies to build factories here in the U.S. to avoid tariffs. Most of these 14 countries are in Asia and have close trade ties with Beijing, including Japan, South Korea, and Thailand. Many of them now appear eager to strike better deals with Washington before the deadline runs out. These recent U.S. actions are rattling Beijing. On Tuesday, the state-run newspaper People's Daily warned that China will take action against any outcomes that negatively affect its interests. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio will begin his first Asia trip this Tuesday, starting in Malaysia. His Chinese counterpart, Wang Yi, will also travel to Malaysia for key Southeast Asian nations meetings. Both have confirmed their attendance at the upcoming ASEAN gathering. But Beijing has declined to say whether Rubio and Wang Yi will meet on the sidelines. Beijing previously sanctioned Rubio for his tough stance against the Chinese Communist Party. With growing awareness of the Chinese regime's long arm of suppression, just how far does it reach? What tools is the regime using even here on U.S. soil? NTD's upcoming special dives deep into the Chinese Communist Party's covert war within the U.S. We sat down with Steve Lance, host of Capitol Report, to get a preview of the upcoming special. Steve Lance, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
I think this is actually the first time I've interviewed you, so this is quite fun. You actually have a special coming out soon. It's called the CCP's Covert War Inside the U.S. What was the biggest surprise to you while making this special?
Well, that's a pretty tough question to ask because there were so many things, Tiffany, that we were able to uncover. And I would say that probably one of the biggest surprises is just how serious this issue is, and yet still how many people are unaware of it, even in our government and our media. And the fact that the Chinese Communist Party could have its hands extended into some of our most prestigious media institutions, like the New York Times, and have a reach even into our federal agencies is really shocking. And it's actually quite scary. I think we've known for a long time that the Chinese Communist Party's infiltration and influence has been in various places. We saw the Confucius Institutes in our universities. We've seen TikTok, how the algorithm there can control American minds. But I think for a lot of people, including myself, until I stumbled upon this particular case, it was just sort of unfathomable that the Chinese Communist Party could extend its hands and its influence into the United States of America's federal agencies. And I think that that was one of the most shocking things for me.
Now, at the heart of your special report is something known as the spiritual meditation practice, Falun Gong or Falun Dafa. Talk to us about why that's important. Why is this at the center of the CCP's efforts inside the U.S.?
Well, yes, as I mentioned, the persecution inside of China, the MPS, the Ministry of Public Security, it goes back to what is Falun Dafa or Falun Gong. It's a Buddhist-based spiritual practice based on three core tenets: truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance. And it is actually as simple as that. And it became very popular. It was introduced to the general public in China by its founder, Mr. Li Hongzhi, in 1992. And it was embraced. It was spread throughout the country, crossed all social boundaries, from the highest levels of government officials to bankers, all the way down to farmers and even peasants inside of China were practicing this spiritual discipline. And it wasn't until 1998, 6 short years after its introduction, where the CCP took an internal census and found out that 1 out of 12 Chinese people were practicing this. That number equates to roughly, in China, because of its large population, 100 million, 70 to 100 million people practicing this. And at that time, it outnumbered Communist Party members. So because of its sheer popularity, the dictator at the time, Jiang Zemin, became extremely jealous, upset, threatened, and began a nationwide persecution. And so on top of forced labor, torture, labor camps, which eventually evolved into what some might say the most egregious crime against humanity of all, forced live organ harvesting, there was also a massive amount of propaganda that the CCP put out to defame Falun Gong. And so that sort of gave birth to various things or organizations founded by the Falun Gong spiritual community to raise awareness, to simply raise awareness overseas about this atrocity that was taking place in China, like the Epoch Times, founded by Falun Gong practitioners, NTD, founded by Falun Gong practitioners, as well as the Shenyun Performing Arts. You may have seen their billboards, China Before Communism. This was what some might call a diaspora response to a persecution that was in large part underreported, or in some cases, there are some major Western media outlets that even parroted some of the narratives coming out of Beijing. And so obviously the Chinese Communist Party, seeing that this was having an impact on the the rest of the world, and a lot of their propaganda that was put out to defame the Falun Gong spiritual group was now being combated through these different channels with what some might call the truth about the situation. The CCP took action and started to activate some of these espionage rings targeting these groups on American soil. We have seen the Shenyun Performing Arts, their buses that tour around the country, having their tires slashed. We've seen bomb threats this year at many theaters, including right here in Washington, D.C. The nation's Performing Arts Theater, the Kennedy Center, had bomb threats while Shenyun was performing that have eventually been traced back to China. And so there have been a variety of things that the CCP has done to persecute the spiritual group on American soil and beyond.
Catch NTD's Capital Report, airing the special report at 7:30 Thursday night, July 8th on NTD, or watch China in Focus this Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. That's all for today's China in Focus on YouTube. You can catch the full episode on Beijing World every Tuesday. To watch, simply click the link in the description box down below or search China in Focus at beijingworld.com.